the dark truth about you that Carl Jung knew all along. We like to think we know ourselves. We go through life believing we have a pretty good grasp on who we are, our thoughts, our feelings, our desires. But what if I told you there's a side of you that you barely acknowledge? A side that has been with you all along, silently influencing your decisions, shaping your relationships, and coloring your perception of the world. This is the side Carl Jung called the shadow, and here's the dark truth: the shadow isn't just a distant part of you, it is you. It's the version of yourself that you've pushed away, the parts of your personality you've rejected, hidden, or outright denied. And until you face it, it will control you in ways you can't even begin to imagine. Let's start with a simple question. Have you ever done something that shocked even yourself? Maybe you lost your temper and said something cruel to someone you love. Maybe you acted selfishly in a way that felt completely out of character. Or maybe you felt jealousy, envy, or hatred bubbling up inside you, emotions you didn't think you were capable of. When those moments happen, we often shrug them off. That wasn't me, we say. I don't know what came over me. But Jung would argue that it was you. It was your shadow breaking through, revealing itself, and the more you try to ignore it, the stronger it becomes. The shadow, as Jung described it, is made up of everything about ourselves that we've deemed unacceptable. From a young age, we're taught to suppress certain traits: anger, greed, fear, selfishness. We're told to be kind, polite, and selfless. And while these lessons are important, they come at a cost. We push the bad parts of ourselves into the shadows, pretending they don't exist. But here's the thing: just because you ignore something doesn't mean it goes away. Your shadow doesn't dissolve, it grows. It becomes a hidden force, influencing your thoughts and behaviors in subtle but powerful ways. So, let me ask you, how well do you really know yourself? Are you willing to confront the parts of you that you've spent your whole life avoiding?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The shadow isn't just about negative traits, though. It also includes aspects of yourself that society, your family, or even you decided weren't acceptable. Maybe you were told as a child to tone it down, and now your confidence hides in the shadows. Maybe you were taught that vulnerability is weakness, so your ability to truly connect with others is buried there too. The shadow isn't inherently evil, it's simply the parts of yourself that you've disowned. And the more you deny it, the more power it has over you. Jung believed that integrating the shadow was one of the most important tasks of self-discovery. But this isn't easy. It requires brutal honesty and a willingness to face the darkest aspects of yourself. Most people avoid this work because it's uncomfortable, even painful. It means acknowledging that you're not as virtuous, kind, or selfless as you like to believe. It means confronting the parts of yourself that you fear others and even you cannot accept. But here's the paradox: the more you reject your shadow, the more it controls you. And the more you accept it, the freer you become. Think about the last time you judged someone harshly. Maybe it was a coworker who was overly ambitious, or a friend who seemed too self-absorbed. Jung argued that the traits we dislike most in others are often reflections of our own shadow. It's called projection. We see in others what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. So when you feel a strong, almost irrational dislike towards someone, it's worth asking, is this really about them, or is it about me? What part of myself am I projecting onto them? It's a difficult question, but it's one that can unlock profound self-awareness. But why does this matter? Why should we care about something as abstract as the shadow? Because your shadow isn't just a psychological concept, it's a roadmap to your wholeness. Jung believed that true growth comes not from rejecting your shadow, but from integrating it. But when you bring your shadow into the light, you stop being controlled by it. You stop projecting it onto others. You become more authentic, more grounded, more you. So, the real question is, are you brave enough to face yourself? Not the version of you that you show to the world, but the version that lurks in the dark corners of your mind, the version that you've tried to bury, because until you do, you'll never truly be free. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into why the shadow exists in the first place, how it's formed, how it operates, and why it holds the key to unlocking your true potential. Why you hide from yourself, the origins of the shadow. Why do we hide parts of ourselves? Why do we push certain traits, desires, and emotions into the shadows, pretending they don't exist? To understand the shadow, we first need to understand where it comes from and why it's so deeply embedded in who we are. Carl Jung believed that the shadow begins to form in childhood, shaped by the expectations of society, family, and culture. In our earliest years, we're like open canvases, full of potential. But as we grow, we're told that certain aspects of who we are unacceptable. And so, bit by bit, we begin to cut away pieces of ourselves, hiding them in the dark. Think about it as a child. Did you ever get scolded for being too loud, too angry, too emotional? Maybe you were told to act like a grown-up or stop being selfish. Maybe you had dreams or interests that were dismissed as silly or unrealistic. These moments might have seemed small, but they left a mark. Each time you were criticized or rejected, you learned a lesson. This part of me isn't safe to show. This part of me isn't welcome. So you buried it. You learned to wear a mask, to show the world the version of yourself that would be accepted. And over time, the parts you hid became your shadow. But here's the irony: the parts of yourself that you reject don't disappear. They become more powerful in the dark. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. At first, it seems manageable, but the longer you hold it down, the more pressure builds. Eventually, it bursts to the surface with force. Your shadow works the same way. The more you suppress it, the more it fights to be seen. This is why you might find yourself acting in ways that surprise you, snapping at someone in anger, feeling jealousy or insecurity that seems to come out of nowhere. These moments aren't random. They're your shadow trying to break free. But why do we fear our shadow so much? Why do we go to such great lengths to avoid it? The truth is, the shadow forces us to confront parts of ourselves that challenge our identity. We all have a self-image, a story we tell ourselves about who we are. Maybe you think of yourself as kind, patient, or selfless. But what happens when your shadow shows you the opposite? What happens when you realize you're capable of anger, selfishness, or cruelty? These realizations can feel like a threat to your very sense of self. And so, instead of facing them, we push them away. Jung argued that this avoidance comes at a cost. When we deny our shadow, we deny our humanity. We become fragmented, living only as a partial version of ourselves. And this fragmentation shows up in our lives in ways we don't expect. It can lead to feelings of emptiness or disconnection, as though something is missing. It can create patterns of self-sabotage, where we unknowingly act against our own best interests. And it can strain our relationships, as we project our shadow onto others, blaming them for the traits we refuse to see in ourselves. But here's where it gets interesting: the shadow isn't just made up of bad traits. It also contains your suppressed potential. Think about the dreams you gave up on because someone told you they were unrealistic, the talents you didn't pursue because you were afraid of failure, the parts of your personality you toned down to fit in. All of these live in your shadow too. So when you confront your shadow, you're not just facing your fears and flaws, you're reclaiming the parts of yourself that you lost along the way. This is why Jung saw the shadow as both a challenge and an opportunity. To face your shadow is to embark on a journey of self-discovery. It's not an easy path, but it's one that leads to wholeness. When you integrate your shadow, you stop running from yourself. You stop being controlled by the parts of you that you've suppressed. And in doing so, you unlock a deeper sense of freedom and authenticity. So how do you begin this process? How do you confront the parts of yourself that you've spent your whole life avoiding? The first step is awareness. Start paying attention to the moments when you feel triggered when someone else's behavior makes you angry, jealous, or uncomfortable. These reactions are often clues to your shadow. Ask yourself, what am I really reacting to here? Is this about them, or is it about me? This kind of introspection isn't easy. It requires humility and a willingness to see yourself honestly. But it's also incredibly powerful. In the next part, we'll explore how to go beyond awareness to truly integrate your shadow. We'll look at practical steps you can take to embrace your hidden self and use it as a source of strength rather than fear. Because the secret Carl Jung knew all along is this: your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the key to becoming whole. Embracing the mirror, how to integrate your shadow and transform yourself facing your shadow, is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Why? Because it requires you to look in the mirror and see yourself fully, not just the parts you like, but the parts you've spent years running from. It means acknowledging your anger, your jealousy, your selfishness, and your fears. It means admitting to yourself that you are not perfect and that you never will be. But here's the paradox: in accepting your imperfections, you step closer to wholeness. Integration of the shadow isn't about becoming flawless, it's about becoming real. And in that realness, you'll find a kind of strength and freedom that perfection could never give you. So, how do you begin to integrate your shadow? It starts with honesty. You can't confront what you refuse to acknowledge. This means moving beyond denial and owning the parts of yourself that you'd rather ignore. Think about the last time you felt a surge of anger or envy. Did you brush it off as someone else's fault? Did you tell yourself, "I'm not like that"? What if? Instead, you paused and asked, what is this emotion trying to teach me about myself? You see, your shadow isn't here to destroy you, it's here to guide you. Every uncomfortable feeling, every irrational reaction is a breadcrumb leading you to the parts of yourself that need attention. But you have to be willing to look. One of the most powerful tools for shadow work is journaling. Sit down and write about the traits in others that irritate you the most. Maybe you can't stand people who are arrogant, lazy, or controlling. Now ask yourself, what does this say about me? Often the traits we despise in others are the ones we suppress in ourselves. Maybe you hate arrogance because you've been taught to downplay your own confidence, and seeing others express it triggers your shadow. Or maybe you resent laziness because you've been conditioned to value productivity at the expense of your own rest. This exercise isn't about blaming yourself, it's about shining a light on what's hidden. Because once you see it, you can begin to integrate it. But integration isn't just about intellectual understanding, it's about acceptance. This is where compassion comes in. When you uncover a part of your shadow, your first instinct might be to judge it. You might think, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be better than this. But judgment only pushes the shadow deeper into hiding. Instead, try to meet your shadow with curiosity and kindness. Ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Where did this come from? Often, you'll find that your shadow is rooted in old wounds, moments of rejection, fear, or shame. By bringing compassion to these parts of yourself, you begin to heal. Another key to shadow integration is finding healthy ways to express the parts of yourself you've suppressed. If your shadow holds anger, find a constructive outlet for it, whether it's exercise, art, or simply having an honest conversation about how you feel. If your shadow holds unacknowledged desires, Give yourself permission to explore them. This doesn't mean acting on every impulse or indulging every whim. It means finding ways to honor your shadow without letting it control you. Because here's the truth: the more you suppress your shadow, the more it will act out in destructive ways. But when you bring it into the light, it becomes a source of power. The process of shadow work is deeply transformative, but it's not a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey. As you grow and evolve, new aspects of your shadow will emerge, and each time you'll have a choice to face them or to deny them. The more you choose to face them, the more whole you become. You'll find that the parts of yourself you once feared are actually your greatest teachers. They show you where you're still holding back, where you're still clinging to illusions, and where you have the opportunity to grow. In the final part, we'll uncover the profound rewards of shadow integration and how embracing your hidden self can unlock your highest potential. The light hidden in the darkness, unlocking your true potential. When you integrate your shadow, something extraordinary happens. The parts of yourself that once felt like weaknesses begin to reveal their hidden strength. The anger you suppressed becomes the fuel for setting boundaries and standing up for what matters. The jealousy you denied becomes an invitation to reflect on your own desires and unmet needs. The vulnerability you buried becomes the foundation for deeper, more authentic connections. This is the paradox of the shadow. The very traits you fear the most hold the key to your growth. By embracing them, you don't just become more self-aware, you become more whole. Carl Jung believed that integrating the shadow was essential for what he called individuation, the process of becoming your truest self. Most of us live fragmented lives, clinging to the parts of ourselves that feel acceptable and rejecting the rest. But this fragmentation keeps us small. It keeps us trapped in cycles of self-doubt, insecurity, and fear. When you bring your shadow into the light, you stop fighting with yourself. You stop wasting energy pretending to be someone you're not. And in that unity, you unlock a deeper sense of purpose and clarity. Think about it: how much of your life is spent avoiding discomfort, avoiding the parts of yourself you'd rather not see? What would happen if, instead of running, you leaned in? If you stopped trying to be good and allowed yourself to be real? This isn't about indulging every impulse or justifying harmful behavior. It's about owning who you are, flaws and all. Because here's the truth: you can't grow from a place of denial. Growth requires honesty. It requires courage. And it requires a willingness to step into the darkness, knowing that the light is waiting for you on the other side. As you integrate your shadow, you'll notice a shift not just in how you see yourself, but in how you interact with the world. You'll stop projecting your insecurities onto others, freeing your relationships from unnecessary conflict. You'll stop being controlled by unconscious fears, making decisions from a place of confidence rather than avoidance. And most importantly, you'll discover a depth of inner strength that you didn't know was possible. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your ally. It's the part of you that holds your untapped potential, your hidden wisdom, and your deepest truths. So, the question is, are you ready to face yourself, to embrace the parts of you that you've hidden for so long? Because the dark truth isn't really dark at all, it's the beginning of your transformation.